What's up, guys? It's Tony here, and welcome back to Man Cave Studios, and welcome to the first ever Man Cave Studios podcast. I have not done a podcast on this channel before. I had a hockey thing that I did. Well, I didn't do any podcasts for the hockey thing, but before it was a hockey thing, it was a Big Five Sports and NASCAR thing, I think, or it was Philly Sports and NASCAR, something like that. I don't know. And so I did podcasts before. I've done podcasts before, um, but I haven't done one on this channel. I've done live streams, which are probably the closest thing to that. But, anyways, today I'm going to be talking about my favorite vacation spots. Now, I said that this podcast would be pretty much about things that I was interested in, and I think this is probably the best way to kick it off. Talk about places that I've been, talk about what places I've really liked. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about places I haven't liked that I've gone to. But I'm going to be highlighting the top five places that I like to go on vacation, or the top five places that I've been to on vacation and I've really enjoyed the vacations. So, just as a criteria, these should mostly be places that I've stayed at more than one day. One of them in the top five is I was only there for just one day. Um, but that one day was enough for me really to see how much more I could have done if I had more than a day. But anyways, I've had quite the fortunate experience in my what do you say? I don't want to say I don't want to sound old here, but in my youth, uh, so growing up, I've been able to go to a lot of different places, visit a lot of different cities, not just in the U.S. but in Canada and also overseas. Um, Two of the places that I've been to. I mean, recently in 2019, I was in London, and you guys know that have watched this channel for a while. I was going to study abroad in London. Uh, Originally, I was going to study abroad fall 2020. That did not go through, and because of COVID, obviously. And then I kept on postponing it, and then eventually I just backed out of it because I wanted to have a normal semester at my college, which I hadn't had yet. Um, but you know, I really enjoyed that London trip, but for, you know, what I'll say about London is that it's such a different city that I don't want to put any of these overseas cities on this list because they'd easily just be at the top of the list, and I don't think that's fair to the other cities I'm going to rate because, just thinking about the difference between London and Philly's a pretty big city. It's probably one of the top three cities in terms of population in the United States. And in terms of the suburbs, in terms of the whole metro region, it's a pretty big city. I would say that the difference between London and Philadelphia is even greater than the difference between Philadelphia and, let's say, Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is obviously a really different city from Philadelphia. Um, and I kind of consider Las Vegas an outlier too because of it being surrounded by desert and not many other cities are like that. But London is just a whole different animal. There's, you know, public transit there. Um, there are a lot of historical things that you can do. Not to say there aren't in Philly, but the history obviously goes back longer in London. Um, and I just feel if I include Rome or Florence, which I've also been to in this list, then I've just got two European cities in the top five. And so for uh, my own purposes, for organizational purposes, I guess, I'm only going to be considering cities in the US for this list. But if you have the chance to go overseas and visit London or Rome, they're really great places. So I would obviously definitely recommend those. Um, but just going through the list of cities in the United States I've been to, I didn't count this beforehand, but it's pretty much an entire piece of paper I've taken up. Um, Philadelphia, obviously. I live right outside of Philadelphia. I've Most recent time I've been there was I can't remember actually, but it was a week ago, I think, or a little over a week ago was the last time I was in Philadelphia. And the next time I'll be in Philadelphia is Well, I'm recording this on Tuesday the 10th. The next time I'll be in Philadelphia is this weekend, so by the time this is coming out, I've been to Philadelphia again. But yeah, I'm right in Philadelphia is basically in my backyard. Um, Aside from that, obviously, New York, also pretty close to me. Newark, also, I don't know if you would consider that really a major city, but it's a big city. Obviously, sports teams there. Uh, but New York, I've been to a couple of times. I've never stayed over in New York. That's probably insanely expensive. But I've been there for a few field trips. Mostly the one field trip I went to, 3 times I went on this field trip because I was one of the most dedicated people in the TV program at my school. We went to NBC Studios up in New York and took a tour of NBC Studios up at Rockefeller Plaza. And that was pretty fun, especially for a kid that was interested in TV studio stuff like me. Um, Anyways, Pittsburgh, and I'm planning on going back to Pittsburgh in October or November this year, so that should be fun. And I've already been looking up some things that I can do while I'm there, and the list is longer than the things I could do when I was in Raleigh, so I'm really starting to get excited about that. Baltimore, I've been to a few times. I went to a couple of Ravens games, Baltimore Ravens games. Um, and I've never seen an Orioles game, but hopefully this summer that'll change. I guess we'll see. Washington, D.C., also haven't stayed over there, but I've been there on a couple of field trips. One of the field trips I went on, actually, it might have just been once, but it was, I think, fifth or sixth grade. We went there. It was pretty much all of the middle school. Um, and we saw the Lincoln Memorial. We didn't see the White House. I don't remember seeing the White House on that trip, but we got to see the Capitol building. We got to see, we got quite the tour while we were there. Even though it was only a day. Aside from that, I'm just going north to south at this point, really. Raleigh, North Carolina. I vlogged that. You guys are seeing that now. That trip. Tampa. I've been to Tampa. I can't even count how many times. I have a friend that lives in St. Petersburg, so every time we go down there, we usually stay with him, and we usually actually make it a joint trip with the next place that I have on this list, which is Orlando. Um, so we go to Florida quite a bit. If you've been following this channel for a while, you probably recognize that. I think I've vlogged trips to Florida at least 3 times. One time was 2019. I vlogged, I think, well, 2019 was all one vlog. 2018 we went in April, I think. Actually, 2019 I went twice or 3 times because we went in December. My dad and my mom I think was supposed to come with me, but she got sick. Um, and then I went there on senior class trip, and then I also went there in January to look at colleges. And then before that was 2018. I vlogged that. That was in early April, I think, during spring break. Um, Before that, I think I can't remember what it was, but when the last time we went before that was, it might have been 2015. I think it was 2015, and I vlogged that. That was the 17-minute vlog, uh, the second vlog ever on this channel, and it wound up being a lot better than I thought it might be going into that weekend because I didn't think that I was going to be going to Orlando that weekend. That was really a surprise trip. Um, Anyways, so Tampa, Orlando, I kind of just combined that into one. Uh, New Orleans, I went there in 2019. San Antonio, that was a while ago. I don't remember much of that trip actually. I went to a San Antonio Spurs game. That was pretty fun. That was when I was a diehard San Antonio Spurs fan. For whatever reason, I really liked Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, so I really wanted to go down there and see a Spurs game, and that was a fun trip. Um, you know, uh, Even outside of just going there for the game, we got to see a lot of the city. We got to take a a boat down the river in the middle of San Antonio. We got to go to they have kind of a miniature version of the CN Tower there, or something like the CN Tower, the Space Needle. It's San Antonio's version of that, basically. We got to go to the top of that and take pictures, so that was pretty fun. Chicago, 2017 I went there, but I didn't vlog it. But that was also a really fun trip. Phoenix, I've been to Arizona 3 times. Uh, 2 of the times we stayed right outside of Phoenix in Scottsdale, and one time we went up to Sedona. Las Vegas, obviously I vlogged that. That was this past January I went to Las Vegas for the first time. San Diego and Los Angeles and Anaheim, I'll just combine these into one. My dad and I went out there in 2017. I vlogged that trip, and then I deleted 2 of the vlogs where I talked about baseball and the Los Angeles Dodgers. I don't know why. That was pretty stupid of me to delete them instead of just making them private. So I could have had footage for those that I could have used for other videos, but unfortunately not. Um, Again, don't know why I deleted them, but I can't get them back, unfortunately. And then those are the U.S. cities. I've also been to Toronto and Montreal in Canada, and also to Mont Tremblant in Canada. That's in Quebec, and I vlogged that in 2016. That was a series of vlogs. That was the first set, I think, of vlogs on this channel that came out the week after I went on the vacation. So I scheduled those to upload at that point. And yeah, we went there late in the summer of 2016. And then London and Rome and Florence in Europe. And outside of that, I've been to a few different places that probably aren't really worthy of note. Lancaster, Hershey, Wildwood, just a lot of these local places that are near me. But anyways, you've seen enough of this Raleigh vlog by now. So I'll start showing you some pictures and videos of my top 5 vacation spots. So here we go. Let's kick it off with number 5. I'm going to go with Orlando for this one. Now, I really didn't write any descriptions out for these. I really don't want to script these podcasts. But Orlando, I mentioned before, I've been there several times. There was a streak, I think, where we were going there every year for a period of, I can't even remember how many years in a row. But 2015, I think 2017 actually was the only year in my recent memory that I haven't been to Orlando. 2015, I said I went there. That was the first or the second vlog on this channel. The first vlog that was over 15 minutes. Probably the first video that was over 15 minutes on this channel. So I went there in 2015. I went there. I didn't go to Orlando, but I went to Tampa in 2016. I went to Orlando again in 2018 and 2019. 2020 obviously didn't because of COVID, and haven't been back actually since 2019, unfortunately. But, it's worth putting Orlando in the top 5, otherwise I wouldn't continue going back there if it wasn't in the top 5, if it wasn't one of my favorite vacation spots. So Orlando is easily 5th. Not just because of Disney. I mean, Disney is obviously big, and that's the one thing that I think we've done every single year, every single time we've been down. Even when I've gone down to look at colleges, I think I went down twice in 2018. I might be wrong about that, but every single time we've been to Orlando, or even just Florida in general, except for the one trip in 2016, we've gone to Disney. But even outside of that, I mean, Universal's down there. Harry Potter World, especially, is really fun to go to. Especially, obviously, the birth of this channel was the Harry Potter Try Not to Laugh series, which still, until quite recently, were the most viewed videos on this channel. So, it goes without saying, really, that Orlando is one of my favorite vacation spots. Disney, Universal. I've never been to a Magic game, an Orlando Magic game. I've wanted to. In 2019, when we went in January, the Pro Bowl was going on down in Orlando. Unfortunately, didn't get to go to that. We had tickets, but I was getting sick throughout the week that we were there, and we woke up one morning, and I felt kind of sick. I wasn't really that sick at that point, but um, you know, in Florida in general, right? It rains there, from what I've heard, pretty much once a day, but it's not like all day. Like, it usually rains and it's 10 to 15 minutes and then it stops, and maybe it'll be another 10 to 15 minutes later in the day, but it won't continuously rain in Florida throughout the day most of the time. And of course, the one day that we wanted to go to the Pro Bowl, none of us had a raincoat really, and it was raining all day from the moment we woke up till the moment we went to sleep. And so instead of going to the Pro Bowl, we wound up hanging out with some friends, which was pretty fun. But there's just a lot to do there. And Orlando City SC plays at the stadium that the Pro Bowl is in. So, you can go down for Disney and Universal, and if you get sick of Disney and Universal, then you head on over to Orlando City SC Stadium, whatever it's called now, Camping World Stadium or something. I think they changed the name of it since then. But there's so much to do there. Um, you know, Soccer is in the summer, so Orlando City SC plays in the summer. The Magic play in the winter. And the downtown area, I mean, I haven't been to the downtown area, but I've passed by it a few times, and it's really nice. Um, just from looking at it, and they're really renovating it. Apparently, the locals don't like the renovation, so I'm not going to say anything about that because I don't live there, so I can't. I'm not really in a position to say anything about that. But they're renovating the city a lot. They're doing a lot of construction on some of the on ramps, some of the highways. So yeah, Orlando's in the top five though, just because of all the stuff that you can do there. Disney never gets old, I think. Universal doesn't get old either. Um, so you can keep on going back to Orlando. It's not a one-time thing, really. And maybe one day I'll be taking my own kids down there. Who knows? But anyways, let's move on now to number 4, which is San Diego. And unfortunately, this is one of the ones that you're just going to see a slideshow of stuff instead of videos, because I don't really have a lot of video of San Diego. So you might be seeing some video now, or at some point you'll see a little bit of video, but it won't be much. And that'll just be me arriving in California. But San Diego, that was the city that I mentioned before. I was there for one day, but it was a great day. There was a lot that we could do that day. So we got there in the early afternoon. It was just my dad and I for that trip. We walked around a little bit. We got to see, some of the buildings from the outside. We didn't get to go to the top of any of the whatever skyscrapers, whatever you want to call them. But the cool thing that I liked about San Diego is that it's when you enter, we drove into San Diego because we flew into Los Angeles and stayed in Anaheim and then drove from Anaheim to San Diego. You basically, the way that you drive up, you're right on the ocean for part of it. And so you can look out and realize kind of you're in the middle of nowhere and there are mountains around. Some of them are grassy mountains, even, which you wouldn't expect for an area like Los Angeles and Los Angeles County and Southern California in general. The first thing that comes to my mind when you talk about San Diego is, or when you talk about Southern California, are deserts and cities in the middle of these deserts and mountains. But there were a lot of hills and stuff, which I didn't really expect. Um, but San Diego was really fun. Just approaching the city, you're in the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden you start seeing some of these suburbs, and then you get into the city, and it's a really nice entrance. I vlogged it. Unfortunately, I can't really show you that because that was one of the vlogs I deleted. But San Diego, that night we went to a Padres game. They've got a soccer team somewhere there now, so you could always visit that. And then there were a lot of places to walk to. Like, there was a lot of stuff to see that we could walk to. And unfortunately, we were only there for one day, so we didn't get to really walk around too much. But we got to walk down some of the areas near the river that I think goes into the Pacific Ocean. So that was pretty neat. And that was a fun trip all in all. And the Padres game was great. I think they lost, but it was a 1-0 score. That's all I remember. Uh, but there's definitely a lot that you can do in San Diego that unfortunately we didn't have the time to do because we spent the whole week in Los Angeles, which there's also a ton of stuff to do in Los Angeles, obviously. Um, Anyways, moving on. Number 3 is not a major city at all. It is Sedona, Arizona. Now, I've been to Sedona once. We went, my parents and I went with my friend's family. That was, I think, 2012 or 2013. We went on a couple of vacations with my friend's family. One of them was to Montreal and Mont Tremblant. The other one was to Sedona. Um, and Sedona was really fun for me because there were a ton of things that we could do there. There was horseback riding, there was hiking, and listen, I bike a lot, right? I don't get to hike that much because I live in the suburbs. So there's a state park right up the street, and I go there whenever, or right, kind of near me. I can walk to the state park. I don't usually. I usually bike to the state park because it's still a kind of far of a walk. But there aren't really any state parks. There isn't really a rural part of where I live that isn't just farms. There aren't really any state parks in New Jersey besides the Pine Barrens, I think. But those are not really close to me anymore. And so what I really liked about Arizona was that there was a ton of that. There were a ton of hiking trails. There was horseback riding. um, One of the things we did, we went on a hike and we walked up this mountain. And it wasn't that steep of a mountain because, I was 12 years old, so I couldn't really climb a mountain back then. But we climbed up this mountain and we got to take pictures and stuff, and that was cool. But it was pretty fun to be able to get up there. And there was, all the mountains are kind of weirdly shaped. Um, you know, it's not like you go out to the Rockies and all the mountains are just, they peak off at a certain point. Some of them have holes in them in Sedona, which, like the one that we climbed up, had a massive hole in the middle of it that all the kids were looking out of. Um, and it was almost like a cave, honestly. Um, but it was a really nice area. It was nice to be able to hike. It was nice to be able to do horseback riding. We went out one of the days, I think, that my parents and I went back there. I don't know if it was Sedona, but it was somewhere in Arizona, in rural Arizona. Um, and we went on this sort of, I forget what it was, but we went up in almost like a dune buggy, and we had, they had grills and stuff, and they cooked food, and it was like a camp out almost, except we were there until it got dark out and you could see the stars and all that, and I thought that was pretty cool. I I live right next to Philadelphia pretty much, so I never see the stars at all. Um, but it was you know we got to see the stars, we got to see the sunset. That was pretty cool. It got pretty chilly at night, which was kind of surprising for me. Um, and they said that would happen, and I didn't anticipate that it would get really cold really fast, and it did. But Sedona, all in all, like, that's not a city. That's a place that you go out to escape the city and see something different from the city. And that's why I really like Sedona. And that's a place that I would honestly go back to. And that's probably the first place I've mentioned so far on this list that I would willingly want to go back to again, like sooner than any of the other. I mean, I can't really say that for Orlando because I want to go back to Orlando at some point, but I would first much rather go back to Sedona. And I think out of all the locations on this list, the first place, if I had the chance to go back to, that I would want to go back to is Sedona. Um, but anyways, you've seen enough of the same whatever 10 pictures over and over again by now. So I'll move on and I'll talk about one. Actually, never mind. I don't have video for this. Chicago. Number 2, Chicago. Um, Chicago is big, to say the least. If you want to talk about the 5 or 6 biggest cities in the United States, Chicago is probably on there. New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Boston. Take your pick. Chicago or Washington is right after that. Um, Chicago is. There's a lot to do there. There are 2 baseball teams. There's a soccer team. There's a football team. Um, there's a hockey team. There's a basketball team. Basketball team that has history. So they're obviously a pretty big sports city. And if you go into Chicago and near where the sports complex, they have the what's the guy's name? I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a museum dedicated to their sports in Chicago. And my mom and I went to that museum. It's in a mall. It's in like an upper class mall. Uh kind of near where the Cubs play. And there's obviously a ton of history in the sports of Chicago, especially the Cubs and the Bulls. Um, but even aside from that, I like to go places because of the sports, because I'm a big sports fan and I'm a sports media major in college. But the other thing that I really like doing is exploring some of the city. And where I was kind of disappointed with Raleigh when I went to Raleigh was that it was a great city, don't get me wrong. It was really quiet and clean, and I liked that. But there wasn't that much to do there. So I planned to, on that Friday that I was there, um, just, or no, it was Saturday that I got there. I wanted to go to the hockey game, the Carolina Hurricanes game, and then after that, I wanted to, on Saturday, spend the day exploring the city. And so I left my room at 9 o'clock and I checked out and I went to the museums and I spent about an hour at the museums, each of them. The history museum, the science one, um, and there was one other one I think. I think it was an art museum as well that I went to. Um, but by 4 o'clock, I was like, what now? My flight didn't leave till 7. I didn't have to be there for another hour. And so I was literally just sitting there with my friend thinking, well, I don't know what else to do. And we were walking up and down the street, seeing like the executive mansion and stuff. And it obviously I don't regret the trip. Like I wouldn't go back, but I would do the trip again, if I could. If I went back to early November and had to decide whether or not to do the trip, I'd easily do the trip again. But the thing about Chicago is that you can see some of the sports teams play. If you go in the summer, you've got the Cubs, you've got the White Sox, you've got the Chicago Fire, the soccer team, MLS team. Um, if you go in the winter, you can watch a Blackhawks game, a Bulls game. Um, but the thing is, it's not just about sports in Chicago. You could go to the sports museums, obviously, but you could go to the top of the Sears Tower. You could go on the giant Ferris wheel they have there. You could go on the river walk and walk up and down the river walk. You could get on a boat that goes up and down the river like I did, and some of the pictures that you've probably seen so far are of that, um, going up and down that river. You can visit that giant bean and take a picture in front of it, which a lot of people do. That's kind of the big thing in Chicago. There's so much that you can do in Chicago, and that's one of the trips. I just went with my mom, and we went in summer 2017, and we stayed there probably 3 or 4 days. We probably easily could have made a whole week out of that trip if we had the time. Um, if we had booked it for a whole week. Um, but work, of course, has to get in the way. Uh, but that's a trip you could do for a week, and you could fill that whole week with different things. You could one day you could devote to whatever sports. You could devote a second day to sports if you go in the summer and want to see a fire game. There's just, and then after that, spend the day walking around the city, do the bean, do the river walk, whatever. Another day, go to the top of the Sears Tower. Another day, go on the Ferris wheel in that whole area, take pictures of the city skyline. Um, there you could easily make a whole week out of being in Chicago. Go to the first Pizzeria Uno, which is my new favorite restaurant. Not because of the trip, but just recently it's become my favorite restaurant. Um, you know, there's just a ton of stuff that you can do if you go to Chicago. You could easily make a week out of that, and you know, it could be the first city, honestly, on this list. Like, it's not too far behind what I have as a first city. It's just a really nice place to go. I went to a White Sox versus Dodgers game there, and one of the cool stories I have about Chicago is that the White Sox were playing the Dodgers, who were my favorite baseball team at the time. And I saw 2 or 3 Dodgers games in 2017. One of them was in Los Angeles when my dad and I went on that trip that I mentioned earlier, where we also went to San Diego. And the other one, it was the Dodgers against the White Sox, and that was in mid-July of that year. And what was really cool was we were going to the mall where that museum is, that sports museum, and we were going up one of the escalators near where there's a Starbucks, and we saw coming up the escalator was Clayton Kershaw, the pitcher of the Dodgers. He was just walking around. Like there no I mean he was really and no one even really knew who he was. Like I got up the escalator and I was like, "Hold up, am I hallucinating or something?" Like that's Clayton Kershaw up there and I wasn't wearing his jersey that day. Unfortunately, because I was saving that for the next day, because the game was the next day. But I was like, are you Clayton Kershaw? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, wow. And I got a picture with him, and that was incredible. Like, I don't think I've met anyone more famous than Clayton Kershaw, especially like that. Like, I've met musicians before and stuff, but there's just Clayton Kershaw walking around at a mall in Chicago, and I'm just like, wow, I cannot believe this is you. I cannot believe I am seeing my favorite pitcher, like, just walking around at a mall. Uh, but anyways, we'll move on now. Number one on this list, I think there should be honorable mentions first. I like to do honorable mentions. Tampa is obviously up there. The problem that I have with Tampa is that there doesn't really seem like there's that much to do. I mean, you can't make a week out of that. Um, whereas some of these other cities, you could at least make 3 or 4 days out of. Tampa, you really would have to drive places if you want to see the whole thing. If you want to see a Rays game, that's in St. Petersburg. If you want to see the IndyCar race, that's in St. Petersburg. But you can't do much in St. Petersburg, so you can't really just stay there and make a whole trip out of just being in St. Petersburg. Um, but that would probably come in sixth. Um, Pittsburgh, I remember that being a fun trip, although I was there for really just a convention that I was with my mom for. So we didn't really get to see much, but I'm going back there just for fun in October or November, probably November. So that should be a fun trip. Um, and then I've got to come up with a third one. I'll say San Antonio. San Antonio, I remember that being a really fun trip. The only thing is, a lot like Tampa, that's not a week long trip. Like that is a 3 day trip, and if you stay any more than 3 days, you're gonna quickly become bored. Um, but you devote the one day maybe to seeing a Spurs game, see the USL soccer team that's down there, which I would love to do. I would love to see a USL soccer game at that uh, stadium. I've seen that stadium before. It's pretty cool. Um, and then you devote another day to going on that whatever boat cruise down the river. You walk up and down the river walk a little bit. But the other thing is like you go up that what I was saying before, that CN Tower sort of thing. Um, But again, it's like that's a 3-day trip. And I don't think I would go back there just because I've already been there and there are so many other places that I'd want to see. Um, but anyways, without further ado, number one on this list, and you might be a little bit surprised at this, is going to be New Orleans, not New York. You might have thought when I said new that I was going to say York. No, New Orleans. New Orleans. How many different ways could I say it? Anyway, the thing that I really liked about New Orleans was that it's not everything is concentrated in one area. There's not one set place that you go to. Like, if you live in New Jersey and you go to the beach, you know that the boardwalk is the place to be. If you go to, whatever, Philadelphia, you know that Center City is the place to be, unless you're seeing a sporting event or something. If you go to, I guess, New York, Manhattan, that's the place that you go to. New Orleans is an entirely different type of city from any city that I've ever been to. You have the downtown area. You have the Riverwalk, which is right next to the downtown area. You also have the French Quarter. You have the, what's it called? Lake Pontchartrain. You could go down there. You can take a bus tour, actually, around there. You've got, in the French Quarter, you've got beignets. So they have their own food. Chicago has pizza and hot dogs. New Orleans has beignets. Um, it's just a completely different city from any city that I've ever been to. With the exception of London, obviously, but I'm not talking about European cities here. Um, and just that's another trip. We went for a weekend because we went in the middle of the school year. But that was a trip we could have easily taken for a week. You could spend more than one day at a particular place. Like we took a boat cruise up and down the river, what's it called? I'm an idiot today. The Mississippi River. We took a boat cruise up and down that. It wasn't too long, and then we went along the Riverwalk after that. We could have easily spent another day walking up and down the Riverwalk, because that was just such a beautiful place to be. The French Quarter. You could spend 3 days at the French Quarter, really, and still wouldn't be able to see all of it. And, you know, the beignets there, obviously, like I said before, that's a big thing that you want to get. Get them more than one day. Get them 2 days, 3 days. You're only there. I mean, they don't really make those anywhere else. It's like soft pretzels in Philadelphia. Um, you could also obviously go to the sports area. They have the New Orleans Pelicans play there, and I think they have a minor league baseball team, and they also obviously have the Saints. That's a whole day in itself right there. This is a if you want to get the true New Orleans experience, you spend a week there. That's why it's first on this list. Because you could spend a week there and still wind up getting on the plane on the way to leave and saying, "Oh, we should have done this or we should have done this also, we should have squeezed in more." That's a city that I would go back to after I visit. Unlike Sedona, it's a city that I would go back to after I visit a few other cities. Like Sedona, I would go back to right away, but New Orleans, I would go back to, someday. But that's probably the only city on this list that, like, I have a real intent on going back to at some point. Like Sedona, yeah, if I get the chance. Orlando, yeah, if I get the chance, or maybe if I have kids and want to bring them to Disney. New Orleans is a city that if I what I'm working on now is going to every city with an NHL arena, with an NHL team, and seeing every NHL game or every NHL team play a game. Um, and I'm about, I guess, a quarter of the way there. Um, New Orleans would be the first city that I would go to after all of that's over. So, anyways, that's gonna do it for this montage slash podcast, whatever you want to call it. Um, this was fun. I actually enjoyed doing this. I like talking about me, obviously. That sounds very arrogant, I understand, but there's just I don't know. There are a lot of different places to go to. If you get the chance to go to any of these, New Orleans, Chicago, Sedona, San Diego, Orlando, or even any of the other cities like San Antonio, definitely go. Like if you have the chance to take a vacation somewhere, take it. I mean, don't the thing that I would say, just don't keep going to the same place cuz there's so much more that you can look at. Like Las Vegas. I think Las Vegas should be an honorable mention, honestly. It wasn't even an it wasn't even a top 3 honorable mention though, and it wasn't in the top 5, but that's like I will never I don't think any of these trips on this list I regret at all. I mean, even if I was the one paying for all of them, I would still easily go to them again. Like Pittsburgh. I would think that most people would say that Pittsburgh's probably the worst city that I had on that list. Either that or Baltimore or Raleigh. But I'm very much looking forward to that Pittsburgh trip that I'm taking and spending my own money on and going on by myself. Um, I'm also going to Nashville too. That'll be pretty fun. At some point, I'm going to Nashville. Um, but if you get the chance to see these cities, then you should. Um, they're really nice cities, all of them. Every city that I've mentioned in this video is a really nice city that's easily worth going to, and I would spend my own money to go to these cities. Um, what my parents and I usually do is we go to Wildwood probably once a year. We usually go for just a day. I mean, half of the time we go for just a day. We don't really stay over. The other times we go for a week. 2017 we went for a week. 2020 and 2021 we went for a week. Um, but after going there 2 years in a row, it's just getting kind of old. Um, but anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening. I don't know what you call this. Hopefully you enjoyed the slideshow and all the videos and stuff that I had. And yeah, I'll see you next time. I don't know what the next video is gonna be, so just stay tuned for it. It might be a story time video. We'll see. Anyways, peace out, broskies.